Welcome back to the Rebel's Edge. It's December 26th, and Bristol-Myers is spending even more money than Marc LoPresti spent on Christmas presents. That and more with the Rebel's Edge. Marc, welcome back. I know you did spend a lot of money on Christmas presents. And I don't know if it's quite as much, though, as Bristol-Myers is spending, but they have 4 to 6 months to pay. I don't know if you get quite that much of a lead time for your payments, Marc.
No, unless I'm using, one of those buy now, pay later services. Not another shout out to a firm in Klarna, but that was last week's news. But yeah, John, I think I spent, all of us spent a little more than expected this year. Certainly a hell of a lot more than I expected when we were coming out of the summer, which is, of course, my favorite time of year, as I know it's yours as well. Although you like to shush, and I know I'm probably going to be doing the show with Pete pretty soon when you take your annual ski trip with the rest of the crazy SIBO trader alumni and skiers. I know you look forward to that every year. But, I think the highlight of the Christmas for me, I got to host for the first time the very traditional Italian and Sicilian Feast of the Seven Fishes on Christmas Eve. That was a whole lot of fun, lots of family around. We had almost 35 yesterday.
Because your significant other was quarantined. So did you host it at your house, or did you bring the fishes over to another house?
I put on my chef's hat and kissed the cook apron and did it over at Mom's, which was a whole lot of fun. But I hope everybody out there in the Rebel Nation audience had a wonderful, wonderful Christmas. And John, I think you and I may be the two of the only schmucks that are working on Christmas. That, by the way, is the name of the all-men's Jewish hockey league I belong to, the Mighty Schmucks. But I'm going to invite you to play with us someday.
I'll have to. And it's one of the reasons I have a split in my eyebrow is that I used to play goalie. And too many hits to the head, Marc. That's what.
That explains a lot. That explains a lot.
It does. It does. A lot of stitches all over my head. I bet in total, Marc, I probably have 60 between both eyebrows, my lower lip here, and the top of my head as well, because if you turn like that when you're getting hit with a puck, it leaves a mark.
Yes, it does.
But let's talk about macro, shall we? Let's dive into the macro minute, Marc. And I'm going to say that your summer of George has become the winter of George because U.S. retail sales up over 3% during the holiday season. So that's basically 1st of December through, last week. That's a big number because we're talking massive amounts. That's why we always identify the holiday shopping season as the Super Bowl for retailers.
Yeah, no doubt. And listen, I was predicting that this was actually going to be a down year in terms of retail spend for the holiday season on a year-over-year basis. The resiliency of the American consumer, incredible. But, John, a lot of reports, I felt it too, and I think some of my family members did, that while we may have spent more, we got less, right? So definitely inflation impacting the height and the width of those stacks of presents under the Christmas tree this year. So inflation taking a bite out of consumers' joy, but certainly has not slowed spending.
No, it didn't. And again, back to Marc's point about Klarna and Affirm, two buy now, pay later companies, they continue to be the reason, I think, that so many Americans were able to push that spending level up, even if the package level might have gone down. All right, let's talk about fantastic futures.
Fantastic futures.
Not so fantastic that the 1st of December was the last time we were anywhere near this level in crude oil in the United States, Marc. Obviously, Brent is well through 80, and WTI, West Texas Intermediate, now above 75 again, first time since December 1st.
Yeah, no doubt, and not a very good time when people are filling up their gas-guzzling SUVs and F-150 dualies going around to visit grandma on Christmas. But listen, we've been saying this for a while, John, that macro factors, unrest in the Red Sea, the spur being where it is, comments from OPEC expecting to continue to cause volatility in oil prices, Brent and its progeny. But the other thing that we're looking at in terms of impacting oil prices for 2024 is the consolidation wave. And we're going to talk about that as it relates to health sciences and pharma. But John, in oil and gas, no different. The oil and gas industry went on a $250 billion buying spree, a lot more than I spent on Christmas presents, during 2023. That consolidation wave we expect, based on the data that we're looking at, to continue. What does that mean when you have consolidation, not only as it relates to refining oil, but also supply? That midstream and upstream component of it tends to lead to higher prices. So I think we're going to be seeing these sustained levels of $70 and above for a while.
I would agree. And all the headlines last week, Mark, were all about how gas prices have come down so much. They're going to be near the lows of the year for the end of the year. Not so fast. Not so fast. And probably stretching out well into January and February for higher prices because of this spike. All right, let's talk about RayzeBio. Now, most of you have probably never heard of this name, but they are a big healthcare stock. Whoops, there goes my light. They're a big healthcare stock, Mark. But Bristol-Myers, as our friend Jim Cramer calls it, is out there on a shopping spree that does indeed match or exceed that of Marc LoPresti, because they're spending $14 billion to acquire Karuna Therapeutics. That was a week ago. And now they're going to spend another $4, Mark, to acquire RayzeBio. And this is another big deal, 100% move overnight.
Yeah, no doubt. And look, obviously, companies that conserved cash during the uptick in interest rates that we experienced in 2023, well positioned to be part of, or at least the beginning of, what we expect to be a fairly elevated, certainly on a year-over-year basis, elevated amount of M&A activity. Life sciences and pharma, I think we're going to continue to see this trend, John. A lot of sort of the one-hit wonder pharma companies, and I don't know much about RayzeBio or Karuna Therapeutics. I suspect that they are both in that category where they've got one or maybe two drugs that are actually out in the marketplace. They might have some stuff in phase 2 clinicals. They tend to be the ones that get gobbled by the majors like Bristol-Myers Squibb. Believe they have their headquarters about 15 minutes away from where I'm broadcasting right now in the great state of New Jersey. But very interesting, great news for shareholders of those companies, of course, and great news for what we expect to be a fairly robust period of M&A during 2024. It's interesting, John, in election years, M&A activity tends to go up. Got to unpack that one maybe next week.
Exactly. They worry about a new regime.
Right.
And so the election year itself, I think, naturally does kind of drive itself towards, well, this is the devil we know versus the devil that maybe we don't. Whoever the next administration might be the same administration again. But that's, I think, Mark's point is well taken. Now let's take a look at StrataSys. SSYS, it was up 5%, then 8%. Now it's up double digits. It's pushing towards 13% rally here. StrataSys is a 3D printing giant that got approached by Nano Dimension. And at first, that approach was not viewed very favorably at StrataSys. But now they seem to be throwing themselves into the arms of it, Mark. And perhaps that's why throughout the session, it's been percolating higher and higher.
Yeah, that's for sure. I think they're going to pay about $16.50 a share for what they don't already own. Nano already has a position in this company. And it's interesting, John, the 3D printing space, these guys, they don't just make 3D printers for home hobby use. These guys make 3D printers for industrial applications, manufacturing of parts, automotive, aviation, aerospace, defense. Very interesting, a red hot sector, and a sector that I expect will continue to have, as we said before, with life sciences, keep an eye on M&A activity as it relates to the 3D printing space. I like it, and I think it's going to be one of the winners in 2024.
Certainly looks like it right now. And it was so interesting that what they thought was just an insult as far as the valuation back in September, and they said no. Now they're saying, well, we're not as picky right now, apparently.
I'm going to be interested to see how many of these M&A deals, especially the ones that are announced in the beginning of the year, are financed, right? Mm-hmm. And how much of them are stock for stock deals, and how much of them are, like I said earlier, like Bristol-Myers, a company that conserved cash during that elevated interest rate period, because that's going to impact how we see the trajectory of additional M&A through the course of the upcoming year.
Sure, it sure will. Well, now let's take a look at MicroStrategy, Marc. Why? Because it's moving big? No, it's not really doing all that much today. But as many of you may have seen, this is the top U.S. company greater than $5 billion in market cap in terms of performance this year. Now, $5 billion doesn't make you a mega cap, of course. For the most part, it kind of puts you in mid cap or small cap territory, Marc. But 337%, that's how much MSTR is up this year. And I bet most of you know why. Because they own Bitcoin. That's why. Michael Saylor was a genius and started buying Bitcoin when it was significantly lower than where it is right now. And now with it at 42,500, it's been a very good run.
Yeah, Michael certainly suffered lots of slings and arrows and naysayers during the long and hard crypto winter that we certainly appear to be coming out of. And look, he's people call him a maxi, a Bitcoin maximalist. I don't know that he's exclusively a Bitcoin guy, but that he's certainly one of the primary assets, if not for MicroStrategy, is the primary assets. But a lot of people called him crazy. Turned out to be a very smart man and return unbelievable numbers for MicroStrategy investors for 2023. 330%. I'd be pretty happy with that.
Yeah, I think anybody who's owned MSTR stock this year is pretty darn pleased with this performance. There's been a lot of volatility in the sector. Marc and I have talked about it. Company we worked with, in fact, Hut 8. A lot of volatility there. Riot, Mara, Marathon Digital, a lot of volatility. But MicroStrategy, actually software and that big crypto component, now crypto just dwarfs what their software business is, Marc. But yep, if you were smart enough to hold on, you had a very good year. All right, let's take a look at this one, Marc, and see if people were smart enough to hold on to NetEase, NTES, because this one, China approved 105 video games on Monday, our Christmas day yesterday, in an effort to ease concerns over exactly what those regulators would do for gaming, because on Friday, there were rumors that they were going to shut down a lot of these video gaming platforms, or at least regulate them almost to the edge of being out of business. And this stock dropped 16% last week, Marc, but it's made a fabulous comeback since then.
Yeah, this is what you sign up for if you trade China stocks, right? The government runs these businesses. The government, in many instances, owns the majority of these businesses. And I'm not going to go down my naughty list of government-controlled Chinese companies because it would go into New Year's Eve in 2024. We're not going to make everybody suffer through that. But yeah, these regulations aimed at minimizing or curtailing the amount of time that the largest consumers of these video games, kids, adolescents in China, are spending playing these games. The Chinese government actually puts a lot of restrictions on what children can consume online, what they can see. There's one version of TikTok that American kids can see, and there is a very different, highly sanitized and educational version of what goes over TikTok that kids in China see. and rightly or wrongfully, certainly a controversial subject, it does impact the bottom line of these companies, and you can see very fast and rapid swings in their fortunes with these fiat decisions from the Chinese government. This one, no exception. So congratulations if you own the stock, but just wait until the Chinese government decides that they did something that they didn't like a month or two from now and the stock gets cut in half. It happens.
It does. I mean, to Mark's point, folks, stock was $104.50 last Thursday. It hit $82 on Friday last week into the holiday weekend. So that's a pretty ugly ride, no matter how you look at it, to see $22 wiped out like that. It's made a comeback today. It's back to 91.5, almost 92. But you better have that seatbelt on when you're trading these stocks. He's exactly right.
Yeah,
well, Mark,
that's why some of our friends like Kevin O'Leary from time to time, and I don't always agree with Kevin on everything he says, but Kevin has been known to say that, you know, some of these Chinese names are uninvestable, right? Maybe they're tradable, but they're uninvestable. When you have that level of the ability for a government agency to flip a switch, like they did with the online education space a couple of years ago, when virtually, if not effectively, eliminated an entire industry, it's dangerous territory. Sorry to cut you off there, John.
No, you're exactly right. Dangerous territory, volatility, all those things add up to, folks. You better be getting a better return if you're going to have to suffer through that kind of volatility. Needs to be 2 or 3 times the kind of return that you could expect from the likes of a stable company like Apple or any of the Magnificent Seven. Yeah, they have ups and downs too, but not $22, not 17% in a day like that. Mark, let's take a look at a friend of yours and mine, Mike Florio, because we have a good friend, Mark and I do, that broadcasts on ESPN. And he's a brilliant guy. And I, every once in a while, Mark, do text our friend telling him what a great job he did. I've not remembered doing that to Mike Florio, even though I find him entertaining. But Mike Florio came out and said some pretty damning stuff about the Ravens and the likelihood that the 49ers could beat them and beat them to a pulp. But that's not exactly the way he said it, Mark. Let's take a look at that picture, if you don't mind throwing it up there, Jared. There you go. When he said the 49ers will, quote, kick the blank out of the Ravens, that wasn't a shot at the Ravens. 49ers will kick the blank out of any NFL team. Well, there you see the Ravens sort of reaction to that statement as they crushed the 49ers. They didn't have the stuff kicked out of them. They kicked the stuff out of the 49ers, even though the Niners, Mark, I will say, made it close despite 5 interceptions or turnovers.
Yeah, no doubt. That was definitely one of the more interesting games. I watched that 33-19 win over the 49ers. Congratulations to the Ravens. But the Jets over the Commanders handily, of course. You know I was going to bring it up. You know that was the game we had on. You know that was the game we had on yesterday.
Okay. You know, the Jets, Mark, will be a different team next year if Aaron Rodgers comes back and he plays like Aaron played in the previous seasons, not the 4 plays that he was in this season. And it does look like his leg is healing up nicely, so I'm sure you're looking forward to that, especially with the amount of weapons that they do have and a strong defense that they do have. But you know, Zach Wilson was just not the answer this year. He wasn't even the question. But wow, that was pretty tough. Let me ask you this part, though, Mark. As far as the 49ers, everybody thought they were damn near an unstoppable force. But the Ravens' defense really made them look kind of silly, even though CMC, Christian McCaffrey, had what might be the kind of performance that he's had all year that might make him the MVP. He rushed for a ton of yards, total yards from scrimmage. The guy, you know, he catches the ball out of the backfield. He runs. He is a fantastic athlete. But the 49ers might not be as good as advertised. What did you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, listen, McCaffrey, by the way, I think still is Pete's number one, or certainly in the top 3 picks for MVP for the year. But we did see in that game some chinks in the armor, I think is the simplest way of putting it, John. No doubt. I don't think the 49ers fans are going to be terribly unhinged as a result of that loss. But I definitely agree that it's not as perfect in Camelot as we may have thought going into that game.
And that's one thing that Purdy, of course, the quarterback, who was Mr. Irrelevant, taken the last pick of the draft in 2022, he played fabulous as soon as he was installed, and then got hurt in the playoff game against the Eagles, or perhaps they would have made it to the Super Bowl last year. And this year he's played lights out, fantastic football. And it's a rare day that any team, especially a team this good, has 5 turnovers. But it's really hard to stay in the game if you have 5 turnovers, because you're giving the ball to the other team just too many times. And Lamar Jackson, who will be Christian McCaffrey's biggest competitor, I think, for that MVP trophy, he's certainly justified in his confidence that his team is the best team in football. Now they just have to prove it by winning the AFC and then meeting perhaps the same 49ers team that they just thumped in the Super Bowl. Mark, we'll have to see.
Well, if Purdy has the same performance as he did yesterday, I think it was statistically one of his worst, if not his worst game of the season. It's going to be a very different outcome than a lot of people thought.
Yeah. Well, folks, we always appreciate all of you joining us. This week, we only get 3 Rebels Edge performances with Marc LoPresti and or my brother Pete and or not me, Pete and Mark. Who knows?
But I like to keep them guessing. If everybody knows, then it's like, where's the excitement?
Yeah, we got to get a little intrigue going. And right now, Pete is hanging around with our friend Raul, and we'll have more on that in the near future, folks. But he's had a great vacation. Mark's been doing a fabulous job, as always. And we will look forward to seeing all of you tomorrow on another Rebels Edge at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. See you then.